Dr. Maha, I'd like to come back to you and ask, as the head of the Egyptian Revolutionary Council, what steps do you believe we need to be taking to ensure a more just future for the Egyptian people?
Let me concentrate a little bit, Melissa, if I may, on what we can do outside. I believe ultimately, as I've always said, the real change will come from within Egypt. The barrier of fear will break. There are major challenges inside Egypt. I do believe that the fear element is a big part of it. And we are commemorating Rabaa today. That was a signal, a brutal signal by the regime to tell people not to move. And there is poverty. And when you have poverty as well, it is very difficult for people to raise their heads. Eventually, something will break, but we need to be organized so that we don't have another dictator replacing, even if he may seem slightly more benevolent, he will still be a dictator, and we want the end of dictatorship in Egypt and all its forms. But if I come back to the outside, I really believe that we need to reach out to a young generation of people who, not just Egyptians at all, across the board in Europe and in the United States, who also are critical of their own government's policies, who are see the challenge of the rise of right-wing politics and fascist politics. And we need to reach out to them and say there needs to be a serious revision of foreign policy. This is not something that can happen overnight, but the idea of democracy and human rights is not just for some, it should be for all. And the issue of justice pertains to all, even across boundaries and across oceans. And what we're seeing happening to the Middle East and other parts of the world in terms of policies perpetuated by the United States and Europe is ultimately an extension of colonialism. I don't always like to talk about neocolonialism or so on, but it is a mindset that is one of, let us control them because we need stability, let us control them because we need their resources, let us control them because in their midst is a state, Israel, that is the elephant in the room, that we mustn't change things because this offers stability. It is not a roadmap to stability. We're seeing how across the world people are more and more aware of Palestinian rights and know that ultimately the denial of those rights will cause instability. Actually listening to alternative policies regarding the Palestine and the issue of apartheid there and so on is awareness, and that awareness is increasing in the West among a younger generation. All this is tied together to the issue of the end of the need to end support for dictatorship in Egypt and across the region. So I strongly believe that our message ought to go out to civil society, to, yes, human rights groups, but others, to parliamentarians, that there needs to be a revision of foreign policy towards states in the Middle East and Egypt in particular at this juncture, because we need, I would like to say, hands off our region, because ultimately I am not a nationalist per se. I believe that the issue of Egypt and the struggle of Egypt pertains to the whole region and other parts of the world. And what we're seeing now also is power politics, the great game being played over again. We haven't mentioned China or Russia. And what we're seeing now is the interference of Russia and China in the states of the region, vying for control. And the United States comes in to support these regimes even more. So what we're seeing is different powers cementing authoritarian regimes. Maybe the United States and Europe need to rethink and to think very seriously that they need to support democracy in the coming months and years. And that can only come through pressure from the grassroots, through parliamentarians, through academics, through human rights groups. My organization, and I personally believe that you cannot change things without politics. So human rights organizations have played an enormous part. They have raised our voice and defended the cause of Egyptians where we couldn't, because our voice was stifled, constantly stifled, through demonization, through being accused that we're Muslim Brotherhood, through all sorts of things. And this continues. So the work done by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty, by Dawn, by yourselves is crucial and needs to continue. But I think we're at a junction now where we need to turn the page and enter the political realm slightly more defiantly, and to mobilize in a slightly different way and engage as people who'd say democracy is for all, justice is for all, and the old way and the old policies of these governments is archaic and will only open the door to greater fascism and authoritarianism. And look out for those states playing a very dangerous role, those powers playing a very dangerous role in the Middle East and boosting the Gulf states and allying with Sisi. China, Russia, the United States. The United States owes it to its values and to its principles, as does Europe, to pursue a different policy in that part of the world.